All right, good morning, everyone. It is about time for us to start our class. Want to welcome our visitors here. Appreciate you being with us today. Kind of a chilly morning. Saw the frost on the ground and water's kind of frozen with the chickens, but they were doing pretty good. All right. I want to make sure that we have that Roman mic today because I'm going to have some people do some reading. So if we can get that microphone, I'd appreciate it. Oh, awesome. Wes is going to control the mic. So if you have a question or a comment, just raise your hand, and then Wes will run over to you and give you the mic. Okay. We were in Exodus chapter 13. And we're not going to go verse by verse. We've kind of done that in the past a little bit, but we're kind of I want to cover some of the highlights. We're going to move it a little bit faster, but there are several things in chapter 13 that I want to bring out that I find to be very interesting. So we're going to be looking at Numbers today, as well as Exodus, looking at different things. In chapter 13, the Lord speaks to Moses, and he says in verse 2, to consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. And then he goes on and tells them that verses 3 through 11 and so forth, that the people are to remember, verse 3, remember this day that I brought you out of Egypt and the house of bondage. And he goes on and he tells them this. And this is going to be a kind of a theme throughout this chapter, is for them to remind the people throughout a generation to do this. So as the people were leaving, God speaks to Moses and he tells them this. Not exactly sure where it was. Like I said, they were when they left, they had a gathering point. They gather in one location, then they're going to step out and go in a different direction. And so God says, I want you to set apart all the firstborn that opened the womb. Now this is repeated in verses 2 and 12 of this chapter. Israel was to set apart or sanctify the firstborn, both man and animal. And the people, if you were to remember this day, and basically God is saying that you are my people, and this is what I require of you. The first one that breaks open the womb is who you're going to set apart from me. I have redeemed you, so now you have responsibility to me, and this is what he is asking of the people. Now, if you remember, the firstborn of Jacob was Reuben. So traditionally, the firstborn received the blessings of his father. Now, I want to kind of talk about this a little bit more because I've never really given it much thought, but as I was studying and preparing for this lesson, a lot of questions came up, and one of the questions was, why the tribe of Levi? And someone once told me, that, I have forgotten more than I have learned, and as you study and as you get older, you kind of forget things, and then you start reading, you go, oh yeah, I think I knew that, so over the years, I think I've just forgotten some things. But anyhow, this study was really good for me. So with Jehovah, he desires much more than birth order. And we're going to look at this idea here in a little bit, where Reuben was the firstborn, but when you look at the history and everything that happened with the brethren and all that, Reuben kind of dropped the ball a little bit. So this is something we need to keep in mind. Birth order is not necessarily important. Because we believe and that we repent of our past sins and we're baptized, it doesn't mean that our salvation is secure. We have to remain faithful. And we have talked about this a lot in this congregation. Baptism is not the final stamp of approval. We have to remain faithful. That doesn't mean that God does not love us. It just means that our choices in life can remove, or we can remove ourselves from the once favored position that we enjoyed with God. So the tribe of Reuben will be replaced by the tribe of Levi as far as the order and the importance of them. So let's get a look at this. Exodus chapter 32. Let's turn there. So in Exodus chapter 32, this is the chapter which some will call the sin of the golden calf. And verses 1 through 3 is the request that the people gave to Aaron. They said, Aaron, make us a god that can lead us. And let's go ahead and read these verses real quick. Wes, you have that?
Yeah, be happy to.
Read verses 1, 2, and 3, please.
Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And Aaron said to them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron.
So we see here that they come up to Aaron and they give him this request, and Aaron seems to be happy to accommodate them. He tells them to break off the, I didn't research, break off the gold in your earrings. Anyhow, take them out maybe. But anyhow, the guys, by the way, Scout, you'd be happy to know this, that the guys also had earrings too, so you could probably start, no, just joking. Next week, yeah. The gold rings. Yeah, so I thought it actually said it was in their noses too, but I think there was another reference. But anyhow, and you think about this, that's a lot of gold. I mean, I was thinking about a woman's earring and how much gold must have taken place to build this idol. So anyhow, regardless, so he comes and he gets it and he fashioned it with, verse 4, and he receives the gold from their hand and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. So as Aaron fashioned it, one of the questions that came to my mind was, why a calf or why a young bull? I mean, you ever thought about that? I mean, out of all the gods, why wasn't it whoever? Why a calf or a young bull? According to Coy Roper, the Israelites lived in Egypt for 430 years, which I knew that. And so they were very influenced by the many gods that they had. And they had a god for everything. The Egyptian god Apis was a bull, and he was very common, very worshipped throughout the Near East. And he symbolized lordship, strength, vital energy, and fertility. And I thought about that, and I thought, I could almost see Aaron making this calf because you talk about lordship and strength. I think that'd be a really good, if you're going to make a image of God, you'd want something with power and strength and all that. So I understood the kind of logic behind it. Although the image was made by Aaron from the gold that the people gave them, God was not happy with it. And he held the people responsible, not Aaron. If you look at verse 8. And after Aaron made this idol, the text says that this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt. And that has always fascinated me, like, no, it was not. Why would you say that? This cow was not leading you across anything. It didn't do anything. Why would you say that? Well, I had to research it. So several commentators came up with this, and the more I read it, the more I looked at Scripture, and I thought this actually makes a lot of sense. Moses had not come down from the mountain, and so the people were kind of losing sight. Their image of God, their idol, was Moses. Because you remember earlier in our study that God had made Moses a god in the eyes of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. So if you think about the Israelites and their multitude of gods that they have been around for 430 years, They too may have seen Moses in the same light. So for them, Moses was the closest thing they could see of Jehovah. Look at verse 1. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, Come, make us a god that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land, see right there, they're saying, he brought us out of it. We do not know what became of him. So make us something else that we can look at. Something else that we can follow. Okay? So Aaron makes this idol. And he uses it to identify, now this is your God. Now it's interesting that he says that this is, he gives us something to worship. Now there's a lot of danger in this, but in Exodus chapter 20, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 6. So let's go and turn back there. Well, let's turn there. Exodus 20. In Exodus chapter 20, we have the Ten Commandments. Now, it's very dangerous to put something in front of you and say, follow this, because we haven't, and actually in our story, we haven't gotten to this point yet. But if you can understand what's going on here, and we can understand the Ten Commandments in these first few verses. So in Exodus chapter 20, Wes, would you mind reading verses 1 through 6?
Yeah. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments.
Thank you. So when this happened and the Israelites wanted an image, this infuriated God. And you can see what he is saying, that do not have an image that represents me or anything like that. And that's one reason why I really like some different translation that actually puts God's characteristic in there rather than just saying Lord or God. We're going to show this here in a minute. That's very important, you know, the Yahweh, the Jehovah, the different titles that is given to God, because his character is what really defines him, not a statue and not an idol or anything like that. So Jehovah is really upset with them. And even though the Israelites were trying to, I guess in their thinking, was trying to do the right thing. And they were trying to, you know, hey, this makes sense to me. You know, Moses is no longer there. We can't see God. Therefore, give us something that we can follow and we will worship it. All right. Let's see. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 35, it says, Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass away. In Isaiah 40, verse 8 says, The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God will stand forever. God's word is going to stand forever. No idol, no picture, no graven image is going to stand the test of time. They're all going to decay and fade away. And if you think about the thousands and millions of gods that have been around all these years through Greek mythology and the Egyptian, all that, they're not around. They're not around. And we don't even have some of their buildings or anything. So God's word has been around for a long time and will continue to be around. So back to Exodus chapter 32 and look at verse 5. After Aaron builds this idol, he then builds an altar. And he tells the people that tomorrow we're going to have a feast for the Lord. So in reading this, I thought, well, that is really strange. They build this idol. They said, this is what led you out of Egypt, and now we're going to have a feast for it. And the word Lord here is actually the word Yahweh. So he's saying that this image is Yahweh, And if you remember what Yahweh is, Yahweh means he who brings into existence whatever exists. So they're identifying this is Yahweh, and we're going to worship and have a feast for him tomorrow. This shows that the people did intend to have a feast for Jehovah, and that they needed something visually to look at and visually to focus on. And then you look at verse 6, and the people are thinking that they did a great thing. They're celebrating. They are just, man, great job. Now, still in chapter 32, verse 19 through 20, Moses comes down from the mountain and he sees the idol. And he is furious. Okay? He burns the idol, grinds it up, and he makes them drink it. That's always interesting. I wonder what that looked like. And Aaron responds in verses 22 through 24. Wes, why don't you come down here and can I get someone to read that for me? Verses 22 and 24. Do you have that, Lynn?
Yeah.
Verses 22 through 24 is Aaron's response.
So Aaron said, "Do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods that shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man," hold on, my phone went dead, "the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out."
That always cracks me up. Poof. So Moses is pretty upset with them in verse 25. He knows that Aaron did not restrain the people. But yet God does not hold this against Aaron. He holds it against the people. So we have looked at all of this and to prove the point that they intended they continue to worship God, but they wanted this image. Aaron did not hold them responsible. Now, we've looked at this passage before, verses 25 through 29. Okay? If I can get a reader for these verses, 25 through 29. Woody's got it. And here, what I'm trying to show you is, one, that the Israelites needed something physical to look at. Two, that the tribe of Reuben was replaced with the tribe of Levi, and this is what's going to happen. Woody? Verses 25 through 29.
Now when Moses saw the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them, to their shame among their enemies, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side, and go in and out from the entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, and every man his neighbor." So the sons of Levi did according to the words of Moses, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Then Moses said, "Consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, that he may bestow on you a blessing this day, for every man has opposed his son and his brother."
So, as a number of people, and here 3,000 were killed, were saying, yes, we need a calf, and here's the gold, and do all this stuff, Levi, the tribe of Levi, was going, no, this is wrong. And when it came time for reckoning, Moses said, who's on the Lord's side? Stand over here. Who's not? Stand over there. And Levi, the tribe, came over and stood next to Moses. This right here, this act right here, separated the tribe of Levi from everyone else. And so God said, Levi is going to be my chosen tribe. Let's go and turn to Numbers chapter 8. So in Numbers chapter 8, we're going to look at verses 5 through 18. This is a lengthy reading. I thought about telling you the story, but it just, I don't know. I thought it was really needed to read it. If I can get a reader for verses 5 through 18. in this chapter, we have an extended story, or more added to the story of what's going on. And I wanted to kind of point out everything that the tribe of Levi had to do, okay, of consecrating themselves and setting themselves apart. And we get a lot more information here. So bear with us as we read verses 5 through 18. Thank you, Lynn.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the Levites from among the children of Israel, and cleanse them ceremonially. Thus you shall do to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of purification on them, and let them shave all their body, and let them wash their clothes, and so make themselves clean. Then let them take a young bull with its grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, and you shall take another young bull as a sin offering. And you shall bring the Levites before the tabernacle of meeting, and you shall gather together the whole congregation of the children of Israel. So you shall bring the Levites before the Lord, and the children of Israel shall lay their hands on the Levites. And Aaron shall offer the Levites before the Lord like a wave offering from the children of Israel, and they may perform the work, that they may perform the work of the Lord. Then the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the young bulls, and you shall offer one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering to the Lord, to make atonement for the Levites. And you shall stand the Levites before Aaron and his sons, and then offer them like a wave offering to the Lord. Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. After that the Levites shall go in to service the tabernacle of meeting. So you shall cleanse them and offer them like a wave offering, for they are wholly given to me from among the children of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of all who open the womb, the firstborn of all the children of Israel. For all the firstborn among the children of Israel are mine, both man and beast. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified them to myself. I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel.
Thank you. So that was a lengthy reading, but you see what is going on here and what God is explaining. So there was a time that I was taking the firstborn, but I'm taking now the Levites as my firstborn. All right, let's go and go back to Exodus chapter 13.
Paul,
Yes, sir.
what's a wave offering?
You know what? I meant to research that, and I did not. I kept on thinking, everyone, but I didn't think that was right. Okay, we got a couple comments on that. I'd like to know.
My version says a presentation offering.
A presentation offering.
That doesn't explain it to me, but that's what it says.
Okay. We got a couple more comments. Yeah, let's get Scout first, and then we'll. Oh no. That was just a wave offering? Nothing more than this?
No, if I'm remembering correctly, you're not far off. It's not like not doing the hula, but it is in that presentation that T just read there. They're doing something with their hands to present something to the Lord. I don't remember the details in it, but it'd be something I need to look into as well.
If in the reading that the congregation laid hands on the Levites, and then the Levites then laid hands on them too, so I don't know if that had something to do with it as well.
It brings to my mind what the Catholic priests do with the incense when they take their containers and they wave them as an offering to the Lord.
Yeah, as an incense offering, as purification, yeah. Doyle Bruce has a comment.
In my studies, what they do is they would take whatever was being offered, whether it be in their garments or in a cloak or something, and as you're being described, like the incense, they would actually just wave it around. So there's a lot of the grain offerings and things like that were done as a wave offering, not being burned, but being taken and waved and swung through the air.
Interesting. Thank you. All right. Verse 13. Any more comments before we talk about verse 13?
What was the start of the golden calf? What verse was the
It was Exodus 20. I'm sorry. No, it was 32. Exodus 32. 32 verse 1. So, well, that's when Moses comes down. Yeah, Aaron starts making the calf for them.
I did want to make one comment about that. In the beginning, after the gold comes out, their gold offering comes out melted, Aaron crafts the golden calf. But later on, Aaron says, I just cast the gold into the furnace, and the golden calf came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that God didn't blame Aaron for this event, but
Yeah, from what I'm read, the punishment fell on the people, because it's interesting, because Aaron was not killed amongst the 3,000 when the Levites came out against them. So what else was going on? I don't know. I'm of the opinion that Aaron should be held somewhat accountable for his action. Why he wasn't, I don't know. We have a thought here.
I also think that the Levites were in on it the whole time. They just made the choice to be on God's side when Moses gave them that choice. It says all the people took the gold and stuff off. I just think it was everybody.
Good point. Yeah.
I also think even the Levites drank that mixture. It's just that God chose not to kill it.
And it might be. That's some good thoughts there. Good thoughts. Anyone else?
Even though God was angered because he had, Moses had spent all that time on the mountain being given the law, but the law hadn't been given to the Israelites yet. They didn't know that rule number 1 is you shall have no other gods before me. They didn't know all of those things. So I think your synopsis that they were reacting to the environment that they had been in for the last 430 years is probably fairly accurate. And I've always been a little confused about why Aaron didn't bear any more responsibility than he seems to have from the scriptures, because of this incident, not only is the tribe of Levi elevated, but he becomes the high priest, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not a good example of reward and punishment.
No. And it's interesting how we see Moses really kind of stepping up, because, a few chapters prior, Moses was still, I'm not eloquent of speech, I can't do this. And yet now we see it's the other way around. Moses really taking a leadership role, and we're going to learn here in a little bit Moses' optimism and his faith, how it's really starting to come up, and we really start to see that. All right, any more questions or comments before we get to verse 13? Verse 13 just seems like oh, by the way, I want to put this in there. But the more I started looking at verse 13, I thought, well, this is really interesting. Verse 13 says that you shall set apart to the Lord, but every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck, and all the firstborn man among your sons you shall redeem. So a donkey is an unclean animal. But it's interesting in scriptures that the donkey really has a kind of interesting viewpoint, or it's looked at really interesting. Jesus rode a donkey into the city, very interesting. Okay, a donkey is seen as of a symbol of service and suffering, peace and humility. it is also seen as a beast of wisdom in the Old Testament when you look at Balaam's donkey. So it's interesting how this is, well, at least I thought it was interesting, how this is in here, but yet the donkey has a very interesting history throughout the Bible. Anyone want to talk more about a donkey? Okay, let's move on. All right, so the people in verse 14 are to be reminded of this day, how Jehovah defeated the Egyptians, and he led the people out of this bondage. And in verse 8 and 14, both tells us that it's the parents who are to explain this to the children on every year. And we know that it's going to be an event that is called the Passover. And so they're to remember this and teach it to the children, and it continues. It is the parents' responsibility to teach this. Many times, people say it is the church's responsibility to teach the children spiritual matters. Well, it starts at the home. If you look at Proverbs 22, verse 6, and Deuteronomy 6, 7, Ephesians 6, 4, it says it's the parent's responsibility. Now, if a parent is not a Christian and does not attend church or has no knowledge, well, then the congregation should pick it up and teach the children. Katrina and I were sitting there talking about how we were talking about postpartum depression and how the difference between today and back then, back whenever then, that women suffer with a lot of postpartum depression now. Well, when you think about our society, the family unit is kind of breaking down. We don't have the support. We don't have a lot of what we have. And so a lot of times, especially with women, when they have children, they're stuck with that child. Not stuck with that child, but they're with that child 24 hours a day, day in, day out. And I don't know how y'all do it, okay? And so we kind of talked about that. But as a parent, it is our responsibility, especially the men, to sit there and teach our children and teach the family and be that spiritual leader. Yes, sir.
We have learned today, though, it takes a village to raise children.
Yes, it does. And it also takes a village to, here in the spiritual sense too, it takes the community to teach our children and to be faithful unto the Lord. So each and every one of us has a responsibility. I have a responsibility to your children to be that Christian example, and you have a responsibility to my children as well. In verse 19, any comments before we move on? All right, verse 19. Moved out of that one quickly. Moses shows us that Moses grabbed the bones of Joseph, and he's taken with him. In verses 21 through 22, we see that the Lord went before the people with a pillar, a cloud in the morning, and at night there was a pillar of fire. And so I want you to think about this. They have an image now, don't they? They have this image, this cloud and this fire that's leading them. Okay, and he's leading them by day, and they're moving on. And in every junction, God was leading the people. Now I want to bring that up. So now we're getting ready to go into chapter 14. And chapter 14, I titled this Pharaoh's Last Stand. Okay, because we learned that in verse 4 that Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he's told that the children of Israel have left, and he is furiated. And we see that this is another sign of grief, anger. So now he assembled his army, and he is headed towards where the Israelites are, and he's going to destroy them. And verses 11 through 5 is interesting because we have this conversation that the people of Israel, the children of Israel, have with Moses, and this interaction, and God intervenes also. So if you look at verse 11, the people say to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, you have taken us away to die in the wilderness. Why have you dealt with us in this way? And so they start complaining. And they're complaining that we're in the desert, we're going to die. We could have died as slaves back in Egypt. At least, we would have had a proper burial. But no, we got to fight for our lives, and we're going to die here. And I don't want to die by the sword, blah, 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 and all this stuff, right? At one point in time, did anyone say, do you remember those 10 plagues? Do you remember what God did to the Egyptians? No. All they were looking at is this cloud of dust coming at them, this mighty army. Moses shows his faith in verse 13. In verse 13, Moses says to the people, do not be afraid, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see no more. So Moses is pretty confident, and the children of Israel are worried. They're very worried because of everything I just explained. But Jehovah is going to fight for you. He says, have peace. Have peace. When the Lord fights for you, we need to be silent. We need to be relaxed and know that he's going to take care of it. The Israelites had nothing more to fear from the Egyptians. Because today, on that day, the Egyptians were going to be no more. They were no longer going to be slaves to the Egyptians. That's what I thought. I thought I heard it. When I turned my head, I thought, I heard. So God's going to fight for them. And then verse 15, I might need you turned up that there. In verse 15, we have an unrecorded response or an unrecorded conversation that God had with Moses. Because in verse 14, Moses is telling the people, the Lord will fight for you and you shall hold your peace. And so we don't have a conversation of what happened. So we don't know if verse 13 happened after 15 or vice versa. But anyhow, the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the children just to go forward. I can hear as a father, you're like, just stop, just go, I got it. Don't worry about it, And so there's a little frustration in my mind. And so we see that the Lord moved the angel and he moved it to the rear. So now the angel is in the rear of the formation. You have the Egyptians there, the angel, and the Israelites here. Now, it's interesting because we go back to verse 11 where the people are sitting there complaining about dying in the desert and how things were so much better back in the day, and it's wonderful. Let's turn to chapter 16. In chapter 16, verse 3, the children of Israel are complaining again, which that's going to be the common theme from here on out, is the children of Israel complaining. And in chapter 16, verse 3, the children of Israel said, oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. We sat by the pots of meat, and we ate all the bread, and we were full. For you have brought us out to this wilderness to kill us, the whole assembly. Did you hear what they're saying? We've sat around with pots of meat and bread, and we ate so much that our bellies were full. Just think about that, all right? Moses, why did you take us away from all that? We were happy. We had a wonderful life. I could almost see two older men, no really distinct age, sitting around, and one says, hey, Asher, do you remember back in the day when we were in Egypt, we used to run around and play tricks on Pharaoh's guards and all that? Oh, yes, Eli, that was so much fun. I remember that. Remember the food? The food was amazing. Man, I gained so much weight in those days. Why did we ever leave? Sarcasm. So how quickly do we forget things of our past? How quickly did the people forget of the promises that Jehovah gave them? So I want to talk about this because this really, throughout the reading of Exodus, this is a common thing. They keep coming back and they keep coming back to this. Oh, we had it so great in Egypt. Oh, yes, we did. Why? Why do they keep doing that? So I wanted to research it. So according to applied cognitive psychology, fading effects bias, that's FAB, refers to the finding that the intensity of an of an effect associated with negative autobiographical, can't pronounce that word, memories fade faster than affected associated with positive memories. What that means is, over time, our memory of an event changes so that we are more likely to remember the positive aspects rather than the negative ones. And I've done this several times in class. I talked about my Army experience, okay? And there was a lot of experience that while I was going through them, that was not fun. But talk about it now, it's hilarious. I can laugh about it, okay? I mean, there's nothing fun about not eating or getting raw chicken, freezing, and forcing to do push-ups in the rain, and then go run a physical course late at night when you can't see it. And you got to lift some guy, Sergeant Acosta, weighed close to 300 pounds. I mean, he was this short. And we had to scale a wall that was 12 feet high. And we had to pick him up, literally, and lift him over this wall, 4 of us. That was not fun at the time. But we do that. Even, what about children? You think about children. What about when your child was a baby, you know, and you know, we look back, we look at the pictures, we say, oh, I remember, they were so cute back then, right? Oh. But do we remember the time that they threw up on you? Do you remember all the diapers you had to change? Do you remember the time that you had to get up constantly because the child was sick? Or you heard them coughing and you're like, are they breathing? You know, do we remember all that time? No, we erase that all. And I hear some mothers, you know, like, oh, I would have a baby today. Oh, I would. Do you not remember what you went through? You know, that's why I think grandchildren are liked so much, grandparents. Why? Because you can give them back, right? You can enjoy the cuteness and the cuddle. And, ooh, he needs a diaper change, sweetie. You know, you can do that. So it is something that we do, and you know, I think one theory was about FAB is that the reason why it exists is it helps us to keep a positive outlook on life. It's okay to have these memories, but we want to lose some of these negative memories because we don't want to live in the past. We don't want to just sit there in this negative self-pity or whatever and just have this. You know, we got to move on. We can learn from the past, but don't dwell in it. We need to have a healthy reality, a healthy viewpoint of what's going on today. So the children of Israel was only focused on all the good things of the time in slavery, if there were any. They lost sight of the big picture. They lost sight of the fact that they were enslaved for 430 years. And I think Christians today are very much similar to the people of Israel, is that we are, and I made this comment once before, we have been taken out of this life of sin. And I know some of y'all have shared some things, and you think about where you were before you were a Christian, where you are now today, and you're much happier. Life is so much better. And we have to keep sight of heaven. When we start allowing the distractions around us or whatever is behind us affect our vision moving forward, then we're going to get sidetracked. We're going to get sidetracked. And we need to stay focused. Don't allow the experience of the past to hinder you from making progress today. Learn from it, and we need to move on. What are your comments at this point in time? We got a few minutes.
Paul, looking at this passage and starting in chapter 20 of Exodus, when Moses gives instructions to the nation, he points out specifically right there in verse 18 when he talks about the thunderings of the Lord and the being able to see God. And in verse 19 and 20, you know, Moses is consoling and says, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you." And through the next series of chapters in the book of Exodus, we see these ordinances and edicts that are being established. And then in in the first verse of chapter 32, after a period of time has gone by, they said when Moses was delayed, they lose sight. And they start to make plans for themselves. And we can relate to that.
Yes, we can. And we do. We do that. Talking to someone the other day about my journey here in Texas, and I've shared this a little bit. I was in a very dark spot in my life. I had no idea. I didn't know what I wanted. I kind of knew what I wanted, but I didn't know what I needed, and there's a difference. And so I just prayed. I said, you know what? I just got to do one thing. I just need to be faithful. I need to pray and be faithful. And I'm not bragging, okay? But how things came about for me to come down here, man, I didn't apply for any job but one, and I got it. And I wasn't sure I even wanted that job. I was not sure I wanted to be a probation officer. And so, but it's worked out very, very well for me. Got a great, loving congregation, got a wonderful wife, great family, and if we just wait, whatever we find ourselves, whatever valley we find ourselves in, we just wait right there and continue to be faithful to God, there is a greater reward that we have no idea that's waiting for us.
Brother, what I take away from this lesson this morning is very important. I think this shows us what true leadership is. Aaron said, you know the people. How many times have people done the same thing, the elders in the church, or preachers in the church? You know the people. So we need to hear God like Moses did. And Aaron was to be blamed in many ways for what he did, but he was not held as accountable as maybe we think that he should have been.
True. That was our second bell. Thank you so much for your comments, and hope to see you all next Sunday. And let's worship our Lord.